Hi, my name's Graham Large. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm continuing with a series of fictional short stories that all feature people who were healed by Jesus. And this particular one is the story of the 10 lepers. Now in the Bible, we don't know what their names were, but I've taken the liberty of naming 3 of the characters in my short story, including the woman who met Jesus at the well in Samaria. So let's get started telling the story from the viewpoint of one of those lepers who were healed by Jesus. They say that there's only one thing worse than death, and that's having leprosy. They're wrong. Don't get me wrong, I hate having leprosy, but the worst thing is having to shout the words, unclean, unclean, as soon as someone comes close to me. I hate it more than I hate those awful Israelites that I exist with, because that is what my life has become. Little more than an existence. What is worse, that these 9 Jews hate me more than I hate them. The irony is that we're all the same now. Flaky skin, numb limbs, pain. Some are in a far worse state than I am. For instance, Reuben was laying by a fire last night when he fell asleep. His hand flopped into the fire, and before anybody could help him, his hand was engulfed in the flames. It was just awful. We poured water onto his burnt hands, but they were swollen beyond recognition. Amazingly, he didn't feel a thing. Is that the fate that we all have to face? I don't really want to tell you my name. I was so ashamed of what I have become. As you know, I'm a Samaritan, and I'm proud of it. I was born 20 years ago in the city of Sika. My childhood was so happy. I wish I was young again. Playing with the other children, we would get up to all sorts of mischief. We loved throwing stones into the well and waiting for the splash as the stone hit the cool water below. My mother told me that the well was Jacob's well, apparently bought by Jacob for his son Joseph. I've just realised how funny that is. These Jews keep telling me about how they have this great heritage, yet here am I, a Samaritan, according to them, a crossbreed, who played at Jacob's well, and the well is in Samaria, my homeland, not theirs. Anyway, just before the white spots started to appear, a woman called Fatina, who was also from Sika, was collecting water from Jacob's well. While she was collecting the water, she met a Jew called Jesus. They talked, and amazingly, he knew all about her and the life she'd been living, and believe me, she'd been living some interesting life. She became convinced that this Jew called Jesus was in fact the Messiah. She ran into the city and told a lot of people that she thought that this was the Messiah. I must have been around about 19 at the time, and I joined the rest of the men when they went to the well to see this Jesus. Many of my fellow Samaritans believed that Jesus was the Messiah, and I think I did also. But just a few days later, the white spots appeared, and I fled from Sika because of the shame it would have brought on me and my mother and father. I kept away from the main roads and the tracks and kept moving forward, avoiding any contact with others. That is until I almost stumbled upon this group of outcasts, who I suppose are now my family. I was telling the others about seeing Jesus at the well, and a discussion started about whether Jesus was indeed the Messiah. There was a real disagreement, with some saying yes and others definitely no. After a while, as the sun was going down and the embers of our fire were gradually dying down, Reuben finally spoke up. He told us that he had been following Jesus, mainly to see what he would do. When a man knelt at the feet of Jesus, Reuben couldn't hear what was being said, but he could clearly see that the man had leprosy. Jesus reached out and touched the leper, and he was instantly healed. There was a stunned silence around the fire. And then Reuben spoke again and said, I believe that Jesus is the Messiah, and I believe that he will heal my leprosy. Once again there was silence as each of us processed what had just been said. I couldn't help thinking that Reuben and I were so alike. We had both seen Jesus in the flesh, and we had both developed leprosy shortly after seeing Jesus. Now, we were both convinced that Jesus was not only the Messiah, but also he would heal us of this dreadful disease. By morning, all 10 of us were willing to put our faith in Jesus. Reuben was the first to bring up the subject of how we were going to get close to Jesus. After all, we're forbidden to get close to other people. We have to stay apart from the rest of the world. And we have to call out, as I've told you, unclean, unclean, to warn people to keep away from us. So how could we possibly get close to Jesus? Then I had an idea to use our voices to bring Jesus to us, rather than us go to Jesus. I figured that if only we could attract his attention, the people wouldn't want to be close to us. I believe that if we could just get Jesus to see us, then he would heal us. Everyone agreed that we would ask God to somehow bring Jesus to us. As the day wore on, we all got quite excited at the prospect of meeting Jesus, and the sun started setting over Galilee. The silence was only broken by the sounds of crickets and other insects calling out to each other. One other sound started as a quiet whisper, and then grew up into a murmur, and then again to the sound of men speaking earnestly to their God. Eventually 10 men were calling out in the cold desert night to God to hear our prayers. All night the men kept talking to God. Hour by hour their voices could be heard. Hour by hour the mustard seed of faith was being sown. And hour by hour the faith of 10 men was growing steadily. I felt that we should move a little closer to the road leaves the village. So at first light, we left our ramshackle camp and moved to a position where we could observe any comings and goings. Common sense should have told us that this was a waste of time. But each man was convinced this was going to be our day. There was no sign that our prayers would be answered. Only the sun rising higher, the temperature soaring, the soreness in my body seemed to be getting worse. At one point I looked across at Reuben's burnt hand and winced. Everything seemed to be the same for this ragtag bunch of sufferers. Then in the distance we saw a crowd, quite a large crowd, following one man. First of all, I didn't recognise him, but Reuben said to me, God has brought Jesus to us. He was right, I could now make him out. The people seemed to be in a good mood. I'm sure I heard singing amongst the shouting. I could see children running in and out of people's legs. I called to my brothers, for they were now my brothers. We have one chance to have our voices heard. So let's make sure Jesus hears us. The figures in the distance grew larger, and as they came nearer, the noise also grew. It was going to be difficult to make Jesus hear us. But we were now determined to receive our healing from Messiah. Reuben counted us down to our agreed chant. 1, 2, 3. As one we shouted, have mercy on us! Jesus seemed to pause, but he looked down at the children and smiled. He didn't hear us. So we shouted, to Jesus as if our lives depended on it, which of course they did. Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. Jesus paused and looked over to us, then started walking towards us. Reuben whispered to me, he's coming to us. But then something strange happened. Jesus didn't touch us as we had expected. He just spoke to us and said, go show yourself to the priest. Not one of us said a word. No one in the crowd said a thing. We turned around and headed towards the priest's house at the other side of the village. We were puzzled because only the priest could declare us clean and cleansed from leprosy. But as we walked towards the house, we could see we had not changed. The numbness, the soreness, the flaky skin were still evident on each one of us. Looking back, none of us doubted that Jesus would heal us. The question was how and when he would do it. Then I looked down at Reuben's hand, and it was healed, completely healed in front of my eyes. Then immediately the numbness, the soreness, that flaky skin, they all disappeared from everybody. Some laughed, some cried, some just looked in wonder. But I fell to my knees and thanked God for sending Jesus to our small group of brothers. The priest was as surprised as we were. He had never seen us in this way. He'd seen us many times at the edge of the village. He'd never reached his hand out to help us. But today, he gave us our clean bill of health, and as a result, our freedom. After leaving the priest's house, we all said goodbye. Reuben and I hugged and spoke briefly about our plans. Everybody wanted to get back to their families and show them how they'd been healed. I told Reuben I was going back to show Jesus what had happened, and I tried to persuade him to join me. Reuben was desperate to see his wife and children, so he said he would try and see Jesus another time. So I bade them all farewell and turned to walk back to where Jesus would be. In a short while I caught up with him and the crowd, and when I saw him I praised God and fell down before him and thanked him for my healing, and kept thanking him until Jesus spoke. Were there not 10 cleansed? But where are the 9? Were there not any found who returned to give glory to God except this foreigner? Jesus looked down at me, and I could see the compassion in his eyes as he said, arise, go your way. Your faith has made you well. At that moment, I knew that I had changed both inside and out. I knew this was the Messiah, and I knew that I would tell everyone what he had done for me. I returned to Sika and met with Fatina, who had decided to spend her life preaching the gospel to our countrymen. And for a while I joined her. But then she persuaded me and insisted that I move on and teach peoples of all countries the gospel of Jesus Christ. Before I go, let me introduce myself. My name is Labashi, and I'm no longer ashamed of who I am or what I am. Because of Jesus Christ, I'm a new man, and I will spend my life telling people about what great deeds he has done in me. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If you want to read it in the Bible, it's in Luke 17 verses 10 to 19. And if you read that passage, not only will you read get to know those 10 lepers, you'll also get to know Jesus. And my prayer is that you continue to want to get to know Jesus. God bless you. See you next time. Goodbye.